How are you? Any message? The message for the box?
I'm at the back here.
Okay, what the film was
Take a shower, okay?
I'll go back a bit.
Nike, put it this the Bagabat Baulando Paris. I ain't Clarice. I ain't Clarice. Oh, sorry.
We can make her die. Okay.
Quando a Luiz escou.
As a party that is now in government for nearly 15 million citizens, it's become crucial that we continue to update policy and make it better. Now, there are a number of recommendations that came from the review panel and some of the informal structure of organization. And in many ways, we have to take those recommendations and update our policy. This will guide the work that we do in government. This will guide the work that we started already in the Western Cape and continue to offer to make an offer in preparation for elections in June. A policy review commission will then be begun immediately, and ultimately that, of course, will be played with process for the year, and the party will go for a policy. There will be a number of incidents that the party has looked at. Issues that took place in state elections in 2019. Those will be
absolutely crucial. And therefore, those resolutions were then taken to deal with those respective matters. That in preparation for Congress, obviously constitutional amendment issues will then be put on the table and the organization must amend certain things. You will recall the DA itself, as a modernizing party, has to consider what a modern political party does. What kind of structure you do, what kind of operational leadership you give. What are some of the things that you put in place that recruit talent? I want for 2021 for the most talented candidates, mayoral candidates, to stand for the DA. Diverse all across the country. And part of the work that we've got to do is make sure that we find the best mechanisms to recruit them, that they're trained, and that we could lead going forward. We've prided ourselves in the work that we've been doing in government, and certainly the province of the Western Cape has led an incredible job in that regard, and the metros respectively as far as what happens in Joburg, Tshwane, City of Cape Town, become important as to how we govern there. There will be deep conversations as we speak to our voters about their experience of those governments and what work must be done going forward. Fellow South Africans, I want to say this to you, that the DA is a learning organization. We've heard our people. We've heard citizens. And I want to commit to every citizen of this country that ours is to build an alternative from the ANC. Ours is to remove the ANC out of government. We've got to build a vision for South Africa where an economy that is inclusive, a non-racial country, and ultimately where we govern, we're focused on the future and produce clean governance. This is our commitment to South Africans. And so as we've reflected on the fact that over 10.2 million South Africans are unemployed, this demonstrates our greatest crisis that we must respond to. And I'm proud of what Cape Town is doing in terms of making sure that when the rest of the country is in stage 2, they're at stage 1. And if we can ultimately make sure across all the metros we govern, there's a far more agile response to how we deal with energy and how we deal with the crisis of Eskom. We come out of this weekend energized. I certainly feel energized. I certainly think that we've drawn a line in the sand. We focus on tomorrow. And we make an offer to South Africans that says, here's who we are. Here's a party for all South Africans that will ensure that there's an economy that's inclusive and a future of this country of accountable government. We head back to legislatures, to parliament, to councils, to do our job where we are in opposition, to hold the executive to account and to offer alternatives in that regard. So my call to all the people of this country, to all members of the DA, that it's time we roll up our sleeves and focus on election 2021, where we challenge for government in Joburg, Tshwane, NMB, the retention of Cape Town, and to growth our support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we'll hand over to Helen to give remarks as an incoming Federal Chairperson of Federal Council Chair. Thank you. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you.
very much for Philway. My remarks will be very brief because the leader has spoken, given the vision, and communicated what we have discussed in this crucial Federal Council meeting. I was very humbled and grateful to have been elected, and I know exactly what this role entails. I will stay in my lane. This is a job that coordinates the different structures, functions, systems, and processes of the Democratic Alliance. It is a role that interfaces between the political leadership and the professional staff of the organization. It is a job that coordinates all the different processes of the party, from fair candidate selection processes right through to disciplinary processes in the party. And it is absolutely critical in this role that one conducts it transparently, freely and fairly, so that everybody knows that they will be equal before the law and the processes of the DA, and that their future and their chances won't depend on which faction they belong to or which leader they are close to. And my job will be to ensure that all of those things run smoothly. I will not be the leader. I will play a background role, and I will stay in my lane. I will participate where it's appropriate for me to do so, and speak where it is appropriate for me to do so, and ensure that to the very best of my ability, our structures and systems work so that everybody feels that they have the chance to do exactly the same thing. I respect and support the leader and the leadership, and I will do my very best to ensure that they are successful and can take the DA to the next peak that we have to reach. The stakes could not be higher. The DA offers a profoundly different vision, which the leader has just spelled out. That vision, we believe, is make or break for South Africa, but more than that, it's make or break for a world that is becoming increasingly plural and complex. And that is why we believe that the role of the Democratic Alliance is so important. And it will be wonderful for me to play a backroom role. I've often played backroom roles in my life, but you don't know about them because by definition, backroom roles are backroom roles. You only see me in leadership roles. But I was happily being the chairman of your global branch. No one knew about that until I stood for this particular position. So I'm quite happy to play a background role and to do what that role requires of me, to understand the job description and to stick to my knitting, which is a very bad metaphor for me if you know how I knit. But it's a metaphor so you know what I mean. I will stick to the role that I have and follow the pattern. I would like to pay tribute to the leader for the way that he focused this Federal Council, his integrity in calling the Review Commission, and his management of the honest discussion that we had around. And there is no party in South Africa, not by a long shot, and very few in the world where a leader would have done so. So I'm here to support you, and I'm here to make sure that our great vision succeeds. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Helen, for that address. Colleagues, in the interest of all competing things for time, we'll take one round of questions. Please make sure that you use your opportunity when you have raised your hand. Can I observe hands? And you all know the drill. Introduce yourself, your media house, and shoot your question. Hand at the back.
Okay, all three hands meet, seat them friendly.
SABC is double subscribed. Public broadcaster.
How?
You hand us out.
I can say News 24 is 8 million footprint. What are you going to argue?
25 million.
You don't have the basis.
Maybe I'm having an argument. How do we handle this?
I think I got everyone.
I'll take questions only
Clement?
from the Farmers Weekly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Clement Manyatela from Eyewitness News, Radio 702. I will start with my question for Helen Ziller. Congratulations on your election. I just want to, you've spoken about the vision that the leader has outlined and how you're going to support it. Will you support it even though you disagree with some of the values of that vision? And we know about what you've written in the past. We know what you've said in the past about the fact whether or not race must be a proxy when you deal with policies in the DA. If the leader has a different view on the vision that this party must take, are you committing, regardless on how you may be feeling at the time, to support that vision? That's the first question. I also want to ask how you will be managing just your differences, Mr. Maimane, with Helen Ziller. I think it's obvious. We know that you've differed on a number of things, on policies, on some of the things that Mrs. Ziller has said in the past. How are you going to manage those differences? Do you think you'll be able to work together and really bring the DA and push it forward, as you say will be the case in the next couple of months, years? Thank you.
Claudia will be number 2.
I'm Claudia Medovich from Business Day. Mr. Maimane, I just wanted to find out, just in terms of going to an early Congress, will you be standing for the position of federal leader coming the next Congress then? And just can you give us specifics in terms of when you plan to have the political Congress and then also the actual Congress? Yes, and I just wanted to find out, is there any recommendations specifically that Federal Council rejected? And can you just specify which they are? Thank you.
Cindy from
I've got a list.
Just 2 questions. Are you able to provide a breakdown of how the voting went down? And then also to the leader, have you given any thoughts on whether or not she will seek re-election when the early Congress happens? Thank you.
Cool. We have Natasha.
Oh, hi. Sorry, Natasha Piri here from SABC News. I think my question goes to both Mamzila and Dr. Maimane. Maybe there's been a lot of talk about your relationship. The relationship between you and Helen Ziller has actually broken down. I mean, way forward to that, how's that going to pan out?
Some of these questions are repetitive.
Clemens touched on it,
But please give us the right to still ask that question. Thank you so much. TD from News 24. I've got a question first for Helen and then for Musi. Helen, 2016, following your colonialism tweets, you sat there and you apologized and you said you wouldn't take a role in active politics. Sure, there was nothing on paper that didn't stop you from making a comeback. Today you say you'll stay in your lane. How do DA members trust your word? I mean, you haven't. You made a comeback, you know? How are you expected to be trusted going forward? Secondly, Musi, speaking to a lot of DA member leaders and people who are part of the delegates, on some level, they felt that you dug your own grave, that you failed to listen to people giving you great advice in the journey towards this moment, saying you've been naive. As a leader, you were naive. Even in how the review panel was selected. I just want a reaction from that, where people who you are leading say they want to defend you, but often you've been naive, and going forward, that might still come back to bite you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Zandile Measure from SABC. Mamzile, you keep on saying you will stay in your lane. This is a political setup, so which has clearly defined roles. Is it really necessary for you to keep on reminding everyone that you will stay in your lane? Because as far as I'm concerned, so there are clearly defined roles. So does that talk to the relationship that you currently have with the leader of the party?
Yeah.
You are the last one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're covered. Let's go.
Lisa from News 24. Musi, Mam Helen has said in the past that she is coming in, she's availing herself to save the DA. Are you of the view that the DA did need saving, considering that she's now saying that she will play on the background? I also want to know, there's been a lot of speculation around the recommendations by the panel around your future, and there's been a lot of speculation about whether the recommendations said that you should step down. If you could just clarify, did in fact the recommendations spell that out?
Cool, and the last one goes to Govern.
Thank you. It's Govern from ENTA. Mr. Maimane, what was the Federal Council's decision on the review report? Did it choose to adopt all of its findings and will be implemented, or how exactly will it deal with that? And then, Mr. Maimane, you were reported this morning to have told the delegates of the Federal Council to go and form their own pure Liberal Party if they wanted to do so, and to stop sowing divisions. After such a speech, first of all, do you deny what was reported there? And then after such a speech, how can you reconcile the divisions that you pointed out in the DA? And then to the new Federal Council chairperson, Mrs. Zille, congratulations on your election. You said when you were stepping down from several positions in the party that you don't think it's appropriate for a former leader to hover around, especially in structures where decisions are being made. So what has changed?
Cool. Can we get responses from
Yeah.
I specifically
I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. Please
You
listen,
use
allow
your
me one
opportunity.
question, guys.
No.
I'm so sorry. You
Tini.
said it's one round. Kyako, but
No.
please.
Tini, I don't want to make it back and forth.
New Federal Council Chair, please.
You're abusing the
We're staying in my lane here.
Microphones, please.
Let me start with Clement.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry,
Microphone.
microphone. Sorry. Clement, from time to time in a political environment, you must disagree. I think that's a strength of democracy, is that you must contest for ideas, and then what emerges out of that is better. I've certainly never shied away from the fact that this is the DA I want to see. I think it ought to be a DA that sets its course on a non-racial future. It focuses on an economy that's inclusive. It deals with the question of justice. I've never been apologetic in the past about a debate around how we deal with the question of justice, which is the fact that apartheid was a systemic crime against black South Africans. And so when you deal with justice, you must address those particular issues, and South Africans who ultimately for themselves have been dealt in an unjust manner. But that's not picking one race over another. It's not a contradictory point. That's actually about saying that black and white South Africans can work together to address that injustice. Because the strength of the DA relies itself on being able to say, in fact, that I don't need to share your race, your gender, your orientation to be able to deal with issues. I've got to be able to be a proud South African who defends you. So that in the long run, one day, it would be possible for strong individuals in our society, and that ultimately every citizen, regardless of where they come from, can be first and foremost a South African who can enjoy the freedom, the substantive freedom that this country must offer them. And certainly that's a vision. Someone asked me the question, do I think that where we are, the DA needs saving? I think the DA has made progress, to be quite honest with you. I think that there have been some things that we didn't get right, and those must be attended to. But without doubt, when I set out to lead the DA, I wanted to be very clear. We must grow beyond the Western Cape. We must govern in more places. We must govern well. And when you take on new governments, that requires new capacity and new support to assist with that. So those issues then go on the table. I certainly was unapologetic about the fact that the DA must be Gauteng based. And this is why we are here. I make no apology about the fact that we must grow in constituencies that we've never grown in before. This is not a departure to what many others have fought for. There have been others who've come and fought the same battle, saying we must go into communities that we've never done before. And so I think we've got to push for that. And part of my argument to any Federal Council member, to any South African, is to say that's the journey we must be on. It's a journey I'm proud of. Along the way, you're going to make you got to make some decisions along the way. But certainly we must advance it. Because if the first objective is to remove the ANC out of government, then you must recognize the fact that you must grow amongst the majority of South Africans and build a consensus around values. That's a journey. That's what we've got to do. I'm not here to save a faction of the ANC. I'm here to build an alternative movement for all South Africans. So I think that, and those, when we go to a policy conference, those will be debated, policies will be put on the table, and I think some of these issues will be ventilated better there as we give a policy offer to all South Africans. So Claudia, you asked me the question. One of the things I thought was good is, and it's not for me to talk about my own leadership, it's council itself must deal with that issue. And I think that there was a good discussion that took place on the floor with regards to those issues. But more than anything, I made the point quite clear. These are the things that we've got to achieve. I'm willing to be open and listen to what members must say, but we've got to advance the cause. And so the question about whether you avail yourself for the next Congress or not, that is a question that at first must be decided then. And secondly, I must deal with this policy conference, because the policy conference is coming up now, and I actually want for our values, our principles to be given more life so that we can make a compelling offer to all South Africans. And if that vision finds expression there, then you can lead. So to me, I think that's the objective. I'm committed. I certainly think that we need to put that alternative for all South Africans. And I think it deals with the question of what Tay has asked me about re-election, etc., etc. I think we must get through the policy conference and then deal with that and then go forward. I certainly enjoy the support of South Africans, enjoy the support of people in the DA, and certainly will make that decision at the time, closer to Congress. We've got to deal with the review and what it will mean. And I was committed to bringing the change to the DA. And when you commission a policy review or a review process, you don't do so because you want something that will tell you all the good things. You do so that you can modernize the organization for the future. And we must be willing to do those things. The DA, we must, one of my questions that I've got on the table is, why did young people in their majority not participate in these elections?
Because there's no leadership.
We must provide a future alternative for them to participate and give young people that alternative and modernize. We can't be discussing with crystal clarity the past and fail to answer with the same crystal clarity the future. For me, the question on the table is, how do we articulate a future that includes those young people so they can participate and know that they can own part of the journey for South Africans? That's what we've got to do. And that's the task I'm committed to doing. That's why the policy work is happening. You lead because you fight for a struggle. You fight for a vision. Whether in a position or not in a position, I will always advance the vision for a non-racial South Africa. I will always pursue a vision for one South Africa for all. So it's not about position for me. As one of my great philosopher friends once said, don't worry about the stage you are on. Worry about that you've got something worthwhile to do. That's what we must worry about. So, TD, to your questions, I'm not nervous about it. It's deliberate. Others might shape it in the way that you've described. I think it's a sign of confidence when you ask someone to assess you. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of confidence. It says, I'm willing to take what you want me to do. The mistake you can do is to sit back and say nothing is wrong, we must carry on as things are going. That doesn't renew any organization. And I want to say to all the people who, whatever the argument is, I certainly think that you take an external panel, you also take internal people, you take the input together, you renew the organization, you focus it for the future. That's the job that must be done now. And I certainly am not worried about any of that commentary. I'm certainly committed to saying, here's the work that we've done, and here's the future I'd like to put forward. I think the questions, the rest, let me close with Govan's question because I think the others were directed to Helen. Govan, when I say to people who want to establish some form of party, you can't have two parties within the DA. It cannot be. You want one South Africa. When people want to mobilize, and I want to deal with this question about pure liberalism or something to that effect. We're not a debating club here. We build our values on a liberal democratic alternative. That in and of itself makes an offer to South Africans that we want to communicate based on that to say, how do we govern? What kind of economy do we want to do? And that in and of itself has to have a wide front door where people who come from different political persuasions can come in, but through that front door can be able to understand our values and work to contribute. The beauty of the DA is that you can have someone like Ngaba Banga, who's the provincial leader of the Eastern Cape, comes from a different political persuasion, working together in a party with a South African like James Self, who might come from a different history. That's the beauty. And you open the door as wide as you can so that people can come in and you build values and you can take the future going forward on the base of common values. Anyone who suddenly says, no, the door must be narrow so that the purists must come in, is going to face a difficulty. So for me, it's not about being valueless. It's about making sure that actually South Africans from all walks of life, who may have come from different backgrounds, can work towards common values. And so I made those statements in the light of the fact that if people who are within the DA who want to in fact start a different political formation cannot have two parties, unhealthy, not going to happen. Must build one DA, one South Africa and focus on it. And I'm unapologetic of it. And I think certainly the Federal Council delegates who were there, who heard the correct sayings, the correct statements, understood the fact that that's what we want to try and build and are committed to working towards that.
I want to just interject before Helen comes in. Colleagues, when I opened, I said that Federal Council is the highest decision-making body in the DA outside of Federal Congress. When the question is asked whether Mr. Maimane has been asked to step down, Mr. Maimane was elected Congress. As an elected leader in the DA, I speak on behalf of Federal Council to say, Mr. Maimane will lead the DA until somebody decides to step up to the game and run against him at Federal Congress. He has been supported. We still believe in him. He will lead this organization until Congress takes place in 2020. Thank you very much. Over to you, Helen.
Let's not disrupt answers when questions were not disrupted.
It's good to be able to put names to faces, because obviously I know many names from listening to the radio and read many bylines, so it's good to be able to do that now. Karen Manyatela. The DA is not an autocratic organization. No leader in the DA gets up and decides what the values, the visions, and the plans of the organization are. If you read the first chapter of our Constitution, all those things are very clear. And then we make policies on the basis of those values and principles. And all of us serve those values and principles, but in different ways. The leader, as you've heard him now doing so eloquently, projects the message. The chair of the Federal Council pulls all the structures and systems together to give effect to the plans that arise out of the message. And we don't operate as autonomous beings. Obviously, in those discussions, we have our points of view, and sometimes we differ, but we're a party that actually takes decisions based on the arguments people make and the merit of their arguments in a meeting, and not on the basis of which faction you belong to and what person you support. And that is what makes the DA fundamentally different. So when you say well, whose values and visions are going to take precedence? The DAs are, and they are crystal clear. And the policies that arise out of them and the execution of those policies are going to be communicated in a certain way, implemented in a certain way, and the critical thing that I have to do is make sure that all the cogs mesh together. That's my role. Not to take a different position or invent visions or invent values or invent messages. No. So that's how a functional organization works. That's why we like to call it the blue machine. Because we all know what our job is, we all go back to the visions and the values, and we all implement our job. And that is what my job is going to be, and there will not be any difference, except that there should be a difference. Inside a meeting, you have to have a tough debate on issues, because we come from the point of departure that no one has the monopoly on insight and truth. And that's why we debate things until we reach a majority decision, and then go out and implement it. And if it proves to be wrong, we change our position. It's got nothing to do with flip-flopping. It's got something to do with assessing the evidence as it arises and being flexible enough to factor in new evidence and come to a new decision. So that's how we function in a team. Ms. Taylor, I don't think you really asked me a question. I think your question's been answered. Is that correct? Perfect. Ms. Claudia Milovic, I think your question's been answered too. Except?
Just as you're now Federal Council Chair, I don't know if you would be able to just answer on which recommendations were rejected or not from that organizational perspective, which will be implemented.
Look, we had a whole long list and we went through it point by point by point, and being the DA, we had a long discussion, we had agreements, we had disagreements, we had amendments. I have not the document in front of me, so it'll be impossible for me to say. And I'm going to have to see the minutes and go through them carefully. I'm really sorry, there were lots and lots and lots of recommendations. Out of those recommendations, there was a long list of action steps. And there were some amendments to some of them and not to others, and I'm afraid that I can't say off the cuff without risking misleading people, because they were very detailed. And as usual, the words, because words mean a lot to us, were very carefully chosen. I think Natasha Perry's question's been answered, has it?
No, not really. I'd like to hear from maybe your relationship with CDs.
Okay. All right. Let me quickly get to CDs. Let me get to CDs, because CD spoke about the tweet that I sent on the 16th of March 2017 when I came back from Singapore on the reason why Singapore, unlike many other countries making a transition from colonial rule to democracy, why Singapore had successfully in a single generation lifted people out of poverty. And in that context, I spoke about how they had dealt with the legacy of colonialism. That tweet was decontextualized, and we know the history. Whatever I said in that press conference, and I've listened to it verbatim again, I meant. And you can listen to it verbatim.
I did.
I meant it. And you can repeat any words here, and I will explain in context that I meant it. I stood down from all positions I had then, and I meant it. But you'll be looking at the agreement, and it's very clear, it says nothing about not coming back. And when circumstances change, as I've just answered, you adjust the positions. And the context has changed, and the space has changed, and there is nothing that contradicts the agreement that I reached with the Democratic Alliance and what I said at that press conference and what I'm doing now. Because the context has changed. And that is how the world makes progress. If you sit and say, well, we once used to believe this, that the universe was in a constant state, but scientists have proved that it's actually expanding, you change your position. That's not flip-flopping. And that is what sensible people do. They adjust to new circumstances and new conditions. And that is the only reason that humans have survived, through adaptation and through analysis of changing situations. Then let me get to Mzwandile. Why am I reminding people that I will stay in my lane? Because I think people are worried that I won't stay in my lane. And the problem is that many people have only seen me in a leadership position. But I've very often played behind the scenes roles, very often. But by definition they don't see that, because behind the scenes roles is behind the scenes roles. You don't see it. But I can do that too. I can manage something and I can clean the toilets. I can do lots of things. What didn't Abafaz? So the bottom line is that I'm saying that because people have only really seen me up front in a leadership position. They don't know me in the other roles. But I'm happy to play very much and support the leadership and do whatever I can to make sure that I do what I can to make the organisation a success, which means by definition to have the leader being a success. Then I wanted to say, I want to get to Lizeka. Lizeka, words are important and context is important. And before I was a politician, I was a journalist. And I didn't say what you say I said. I have never said I'm coming back to save the DA. I mean, no one would be stupid enough to say it. So context is important. And what I did say was I couldn't sit back after the by-elections that we've seen and watch the DA unraveling. That's a very different thing. And in a very different context. And believe me, it's journalists' role to hold politicians and other people accountable, but you know that I believe vice versa counts as well. I believe very strongly that vice versa counts as well. And I take up the challenge wherever it is, and I like to be accurately quoted and contextually quoted. Then let me look at govern. Govern said that when I was sitting down, I said it's not good to have the ex-leader in structures. It's not good to have people in the same structures in the same kind of positions. So when I was co-opted onto the federal executive after I just stepped down as leader, there was a situation where a new leader had to be given their own space without the old leader having their own opinions and different views. And that's absolutely right. But I won't be playing that role now. I'll be chairing a meeting. And the critical point is of being in the chair of the meeting is that you don't sit and argue your point of view. You facilitate the ability of others to argue their point of view, and you make sure that it's free and fair and properly conducted. It's a completely different role. And I will be there to support the leadership in everything that they do. And then for the person who just interjected there from the floor and said that the young people didn't vote because of a lack of leadership, if they are unhappy with what's on offer in South Africa, I suggest to them that they get up, start their own party, and see how many people they can get to vote for them. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen,
sorry, very quickly,
No, Tidi, you're not taking any more questions.
Was a discussion. Sorry, but like honestly,
And she didn't
the IRR was an issue.
many of
Was it
you
not
here,
discussed?
many of you here have even made requests that are scheduled for beyond today, with the Federal Council Chair, even with the leader.
But
For the purposes
just
of
the
now,
IRR.
for the purposes of
okay,
now,
could you please answer
we
that
are done.
question?
That's why I asked,
The
get your
IRR
opportunity.
must continue.
Yeah, but okay,
Wait,
my
Happy
question.
Sunday, let's go support
So
the ball.
could you please answer my question, please? Madam Zulu, you said you'd get back to it about your relationship with Mr. Lucy Naiman. Please.
Lucy and I have always had a very good relationship. We've been always cordial. We've been through some strained times, and we have really always been decent, polite, professional, and friendly, and we will continue being that.
Amen. I'm going to process some of the requests that I've received from you with the new federal chair and we'll come back.
Oh my gosh. So, FedCo didn't discuss IRR at all.
You can WhatsApp me.
You're okay with the IRR and the issue?
Where?
I'm asking.
Sunday time. Where?
I want the-
You want to